everybody. Hello, hello. All right, and for those of you who are over in Germany, good Morgen, guten Abend, halli, hallo. Hello. Okay, right. So, I think we still have that soccer European Championship going on, right? The AM. So, I think I'm gonna try and stay within 1 hour because this time I looked it up. So I think the next game is gonna start at 9 o'clock, right? For those of you who know, let me know. And okay, so nice and snappy today. We are painting the prompt for week 2 of Aloha 24 June challenge. The challenge I'm posting over on my Instagram accounts, Aloha Watercolors and the Aloha Studios. This month's theme is at the farmers market. We're working in watercolor and ink. And today we're gonna paint a little farmers market haul. So what we buy at the market, or I should say what I buy at the market, which is mostly fruits and veggies, and I sometimes buy honey as well. So I'm gonna turn the camera around and we're gonna start. Okay, let's go. You know the drill, it's gonna be a bit shaky. And then once I've turned the camera around, I'm also going to be able to see your comments because I've set up my iPad so I can see it. Oh, I just, okay, I just did a thing here. Oops, that just came off. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix it while holding the phone. This is going to be interesting. Yeah, almost there, you guys. One of these days, I will set up another camera somehow. Okay, here we go. And as always, please let me know how the audio is, how the picture is, if I should zoom in, zoom out. Okay, so I'm looking over at the chat. Hello, Tanya, Sylvie, Tracy, Megan. Hello, everybody. Alina, Katya. I've also told my mom, so she might show up a little later too. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about these different versions I've painted here. So this is the one we will basically do today, which is watercolor base. And then I used a brush pen with waterproof ink to paint over it. However, because we do the watercolor first and let it dry, it doesn't really matter if your ink is waterproof or not. Then when I first tried this whole thing, I just used a cheaper sketchbook with drawing paper to kind of find out how I could break down the wicker basket into easy steps, which you can see here. I tried out different things. This paper doesn't really hold the ink too well, so it just feathered out a little bit. I still kind of like the look. It looks a bit vintage, washed out. But this is kind of like how I try out my tutorials before I put them up here. You know, I look at the object that I want to paint and I try to break it down into simplified steps. And then yesterday night, I just kind of went a bit overboard and I did the whole mixed media thing. So I added a lot of colored pencil and all that stuff. You know me, I like my mixed media. But today we're just gonna do illustration in watercolor and ink. And oh, just one more thing. The reason I wanted to show you this piece is that I didn't use a brush pen for this one. I just used a regular fine liner. So it does look a bit different. So depending on what you like better, you can either use a fine liner today or a brush pen. So here she is. Hi, Mom. Schönes Klassentreffen wieder. Okay, so you ladies and cats and dogs, I will use just some regular wood pulp paper. So this is not cotton. This is a Canson XL watercolor paper. And I have to say, for anything that's not a lot of layering or, you know, super nice blends, this is a totally sufficient paper. So for a more for a illustration that doesn't use too much water, I'd say this is perfectly fine. Then I have just a few brushes today, and then number 2, 4, and 6 round brush. And I have my Pentel Pocket brush pen. So this one has real bristles, but you can also use any other kind of ink tool. You could even use a dip pen, or you could use a colored pencil to do the outlines. It all goes. And as for watercolors, I have my own handmade Aloha watercolors today. And I'm just going to give you the color names and what they are. So we're starting with my yellow ochre. This is Beach 2. And then I have our raw umber, Waimea. This is a Castle Brown, Kaleo, which is also the name of my neighbor's dog. And this is Kohola Synthetic Indigo. Over here, I have Night Dive. That's a mix of Prussian blue, cobalt green, and phthalo turquoise. But basically, it's a dark teal. Over here, we have Papaya, which is an Indian yellow. Opera Pink, which is opera pink. And Kupukupu is a lime green. And then I have Manta, which is a gray ochre. I think in the materials list I said monk seal. It's very similar. It's also a gray ochre. One is more on the light, warm side, and one is more on the cooler side. So it doesn't really matter. You can also just use a black and just water it down a little bit. Same effect. Okay. So, hi Colleen from Houston. And as I said, as always, please feel free to comment or, ask any questions. And we're going to start with the sketch today, which if you follow Tanya, Miss Nice Day, who's in the chat today, you know that that's her jam. First the sketch, then everything else. Okay, I'm going to lay this here to the side so that you have the reference right there. And I have it right there as well. Okay, so we want to start with an oval shape. Please let me know if you can see the pencil. It's kind of hard to see, huh? I'm going to go a bit closer. So I'm going to press down a little more. But for you, I want you to not press down too much, okay? I'm only doing it so you can see it better. So we have our oval shape here. And then the bottom of the basket is a bit more flat. And then about in the middle, here and here, you can draw in an elliptic shape like this. And you might notice that I am not drawing the line all the way through, so I'm kind of doing a dotted line, which is on purpose. First of all, I think it's easier to create shapes, where you don't have to draw the full line. And then also for this particular wicker basket, it's more conducive to have dotted lines, because that's pretty much what the basket looks like too. There's a lot of braids and twists and turns in this basket, and I think you can represent that really well, or better, with a dotted line. This is pretty much all you need for the sketch, I'd say. And then we're gonna start painting the basket and let that dry, and then we'll add the fruits and all the other things that are inside the basket later. Okay, if you have a really strong pencil line like I do, you can also just take an eraser and lightly erase over it to make the pencil lines a bit less visible, because as you know, once you paint over pencil with watercolor, you won't be able to erase the pencil anymore. I'm not too concerned about it today, as we're gonna add ink lines later. So it's all gonna look very much on purpose, I'd say. But just in general, if you paint maybe just in watercolor, then you might want to make sure that the pencil lines are not as strongly visible. I'm starting with my yellow ochre beach 2. It's only called 2 because the pigment of beach 1 doesn't get manufactured anymore. So I came up with this brilliant idea to find another pigment and call it beach 2. I know, very creative. So the way you're gonna paint the handle of the basket, we're gonna simplify the idea of a braid. So you paint a short, slightly curved line like this, and then at about the center point, you start with your new part of the braid, like this. And you just follow the curved line of your pencil sketch. So in this way, you can also paint chains, for example, any type of braid. It's a very simplified way, but you know, this is usually what all my tutorials are about. I want to simplify things, make them easy to understand, and once you've got it, you know, you can make it more difficult. You can find something to add. You can go into more details. But for me, the first step is always I look at something and I try to break it down into easier and manageable steps. I'm gonna go even closer. All right. So for the next part, we are still with the basket. Let me see where I can place this so it makes sense. I'm gonna place it up here. Okay, so next we're gonna follow the dotted lines of the sketch. So make sure you don't paint these strokes all the way through. And if you can, try to make the gaps in different places. So stroke number 1, 2, 3, and all the gaps are in different spots. So I don't want you to have the gaps all in one line, is what I'm saying. I think the easiest way to do it is to just do it and not really think about it too much, and then you'll naturally just dot, dot, dot your way down. Okay, and then the next step, we're gonna do the same thing for this line that we did up here. So we start here with one curved stroke. In the middle, add the next one, and just continue to the other side. And then for the center of the basket, or for this, you know, for the belly part, we'll do every other line and we'll add very simple lines like this. So here, and then we'll jump over one, and then at the next one, same thing. We'll jump over the next and do another one. So don't worry if you don't have the exact same amount of lines that I do have here. That's not a problem at all. You might end up having to paint this outer line here. That's totally fine because that's what we're gonna do next. So you might have to rearrange things a little bit depending on how many lines you've drawn or painted. But the idea is to paint one row or one part with one color and then use a slightly darker color. In this case, I'm using my raw umber Waimea, and then go back in, and then in between the first lines, add the next row. And these can overlap because this is also really what happens in a basket. So don't worry if you paint over your first bunch of lines like this. This is exactly what we want. And for the two sides of the basket, you'll paint the same lines, but make them a bit more narrow. See? Like this. You can probably tell I'm using much more water for this part than for the yellow ochre first part. And it's usually, or this is because I want everything to blend a little bit. My paint was still wet or moist on the paper, and I do want to have a few nice blends in here. I can also force this a little bit by dropping in some of my raw umber into the spots that were still wet. Okay, right now I think it looks almost like something that has been knitted, you know. So that would be a success because we want something that looks like it's interlocked, interwoven, just like a basket. While the first yellow ochre layer is still moist, I'm gonna go in and add a few shadows. So we're gonna do everything that's a shadow on the left hand side. And I do realize that this is not part of my step-by-step tutorial, but that's mostly because in the step-by-step I really try to break everything down into 4 or 6 steps maximum, where I would probably not always paint it that exact way. But I think if I did my step-by-step tutorials the exact way I painted everything, I would probably have like 32 steps. So this is why I do the live streams. So with the step-by-step, you get the first general idea, and then we can paint it together, and I can show you my tips and tricks the way I do it. Okay, drop in some more paint here on the left side. And then we're gonna add another line down here. I'm holding my brush very gently, very loosely, and just kind of dotting my way in here. Okay, and then search for the next bunch of yellow lines here. Add a little bit of the darker color on the left hand side. And if it's already too dry, you can go rinse your brush and dry it a little bit. And drag that darker paint over into the lighter paint to create a little bit of a nice blend here. Okay, let me see what's going on in the chat over there. I haven't looked there in a while. Sylvie says, my brain always makes symmetry. Always hard for me to do things like this. Oh, you mean the the first part, right? Where I added the first line of strokes. or even the downward strokes. Yeah, I get it. I think it's something that a lot of people have. Our brains crave symmetry. It's, at least that's what I read. Humans think that symmetry is beautiful, and I agree. But for painting, and especially painting organic objects, what makes the difference to it looking too sterile, I think, is sometimes to let go of the symmetry and try to break that up a little bit. So normally I would recommend that you wait till everything is dry until you do this step, which is to take out the pencil line here in the back, because obviously you run the risk of having your little rubber pieces, eraser pieces, messed with the rest of your painting. So don't do what I'm doing. Okay, so while everything dries, I'm gonna do one more thing. I don't think that's in the step-by-step either. So I'm gonna use my Indian yellow. You can probably not see this. I have a little palette there. Just gonna water it down a little bit. So I want a very light wash of this yellow. And then I'm just gonna carefully dab it in between the lines of my basket. You can leave the basket like this. You can leave it with all these white areas. It's totally up to you. I think it looks a bit more better, as they say here. More better when you add a little bit of a yellow in between like this. So I'm basically faking that there are more braids and strands of the basket down here or inside. All right. So for the next step, or before I go to the next step, I'm gonna have to dry this layer. So you know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna go switch on the hair dryer and I'll be right back. The nice thing about paper that's not cotton is that it dries so fast. So it's almost dry. You know, I'm not too concerned about the sides. That's okay. I mostly need to be dry up here in the center where we're gonna place our goodies. Okay, let me switch to a number 6 brush. And now for my favorite part, the watercolor blobs. Let's start with the pineapple here in the center. And we'll add some other mystery fruits here. So now already while I'm doing this, and again, I know this is not part of the tutorial, but I'll add a little bit of a darker color. In this case, my opera pink, very, very diluted, to the left side of my fruits here. So I'm already doing the shadow part while my fruits are still wet. This will lead to a more graduate blend. You can skip this step and just paint all your blobs first, and then when everything is dry, you can add a very fine layer of shadow. That works too. This is how it's described in the tutorial. But I do love when there is a gradual, almost like an ombre effect. And then you can see that I'm adding my green blobs while the other paint is still wet. And again, you can make your choice here. You can wait till everything is dry and then add your other blobs, or you can just go with the flow and not mind that everything will bleed into each other. I think that really is a bit of a matter of preference. So I don't mind because they're all fruits, and don't forget we're gonna define the shapes later with our ink lines. So I really don't mind a few bleeds here and there. I think if your paper is really wet and everything is super wet and you have bleeds to the point where everything turns brown when it mixes, in that case I would wait a little bit. Okay, Mom says she likes my baskets pattern. Oh, thank you. I have a basket here in real life that looks like that, and that was what I was looking at when I drew this. So I didn't come up with a pattern. It was already there. In reality though, you guys, I never go to the market with a basket. I wish I had a large enough one, but the basket I have it's like this size. It's like an Easter egg basket. So that's not enough. So I usually just have a big old cooling bag and I have ice in it. And that's how I go to the market. So yeah, one of these days I will get a really, really large basket to go to the market. And Colleen says, building up with different colors, so simple and effective. Oh, thanks. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, so for the basket part, really just using two different colors gives you this perspective of, or the makes you believe that there are different depths in the basket. And Alina says, who does? Go to the market with a basket? Oh, you'd be surprised here in Hawaii. I actually see quite a few people with baskets. Don't forget, here in Hawaii, people also still make their own baskets. So weaving is a big thing here still. So you can actually see people even with handmade baskets, which is really neat, I think. So for the pineapple greens, take your round brush, set it down, and then just swoosh it to the outside like this. So you go from the inside and just let it go. Because when you look at a pineapple, oftentimes the leaves are already a bit crinkly on the edges. So don't worry if the tips of your pineapple leaves are not exactly super pointy. That's totally all right. And again, I'm gonna use a darker color. In this case, the Night Dive, dark teal. Grabbing a bit of my pigment, adding some water to make it a bit thinner, and then I just drop it in here, also more towards the left-hand side, but also here in the center and at the bottom. And then same goes for my light green little fruits here in the basket. Gonna add a little bit of green on the left-hand side. Don't worry too much about blending everything perfectly. It's gonna look just fine as soon as it dries, and we'll add some ink. can hear my neighbor just stopped in front of our house. What's happening? Adding some more pink for my pineapple. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, and next I'm gonna add a few bags and kind of like a bottle. So the bags in this case, when I go to the market, I usually go because my friend works there. She has a honeybee farm and she makes the most wonderful honey. And she also makes a few other products like Chex Mix. So over here in the US, a Chex Mix is basically a snack. So you have different, it's almost feels like a cereal, you know, like a granola thing. So you have different little snacks, and then she bakes them with honey, and it just turns into this most delicious, very crunchy snack mix. You can also add little tiny pretzels, and then the mix of salt and sugar. Ooh, the Japanese call it umami, I think. Right, Mom? Umami for sweet and salt. She's probably nodding along now, but it always takes her so long to type her answers. Poor thing. Wouldn't it be cool if YouTube had this option for people like Zoom to just push the button and just say yes or no? Okay, Sylvie says, is it the chainsaw neighbor? Oh, we have a few of those. So we are surrounded by neighbors, and a lot of them, of course, you know, because we're in the jungle, they do a lot of work on trees and the yard, etc. No, this is actually the neighbor with the two dogs, Leo and Malio. He probably stopped because the little dog, Malio, she just gave birth to 4 little puppy babies. So she's a Chihuahua dog, so she's already tiny. And the puppies are, I'm not kidding, they're this size. And the paws are the size of my pinky finger. I have never seen anything cuter. It's unbearable, I'm telling you. So right after this session, I'm gonna go over there and do some puppy babysitting while my neighbor is at work. So yeah, that's what we do over here. We kind of have, I don't know, shared custody over the dogs. It's fun. I don't think the dogs even realize that we're 2 different households. They just, you know, walk in and out of my house, his house. It's all the same to them. So you can see me drop in some more paint here on the left-hand side of the basket. It's more of the same color of the raw umber. Just drop this over here. For a bit more shadow, and also I'm waiting for the gray part to dry a little more before I add in my honey bottle. Okay, I think that's enough. Okay, I'm looking over at the chat, and yes, Mom is finally there, and she says it's called umami. So that's you guys, I'm not making fun of my mom, okay? This is very, very loving. She makes fun of herself, by the way, for being kind of slow with the typing. So umami in Japanese is the mix of sweet and salt, and I love it. And Alina wants to move in front of the yard. I think you and Sylvie, you can both move here. make watercolors and be on puppy watching duty. Okay, let me check on how wet that gray still is. It's a bit wet still. You know what? I'm just gonna dip the honey bottle. If you want to draw it in, just wait till the gray is dry and then just, you know, draw in a little bit of, paint in a little bit of brown, like burnt umber or something for the bottle. But what I'm gonna do next is add the shadow here at the bottom. So I'm grabbing some of my gray ochre and just adding a little bit of a shadow down here. Don't be too concerned about the shape of the shadow. Just make sure that it's a bit darker where it's close to the basket, and then it kind of fizzles out into a very light shade of gray towards the edges. Unless you are in the middle of the day, lunch hour, and the sun is shining super bright. I mean, not exactly at 12, of course, because then you'd have no shadow, but I'm saying close to lunch hour when the sun is super bright and your shadows are very crisp, then you'd have a totally defined shadow, of course. But for painting, I usually prefer to have a more fuzzy shadow, like this. So I usually start with a very light color, like this gray ochre, and now I'm dropping in some of my Castle brown. You can even do a little bit of indigo to make it really dark. Just be a bit careful. You don't want it to be too dark because then it'll take all the attention away from the basket. So gotta find a little bit of a balance there with the shadow. And remember, if it looks really dark right now, it won't look dark later because watercolor dries a bit lighter. And now that I have used indigo down here, I kind of want to use indigo somewhere else in my painting too, to create a little bit of a balance. So I'm gonna go in and drop in a little bit of indigo here on the left hand side of my bags. That's a bit intense, so I'm rinsing my brush and I'm drying it and just blending it with the gray layer underneath. I just looked over to the chat. I love how you guys have your own chat going on while I have my tutorial going on here. This is wonderful. So Sylvie's baking the cake and Alina and I volunteer for eating the cake. Yes, I'm in. Okay, so I think we're done with the watercolor part. Of course, you could just go ahead and add more details, more shadows. But at this point, because I know that I'm gonna go in with my brush pen and my ink lines, I don't really feel the need. And then another tip, if you're not sure if you wanna add some watercolor later, use a waterproof ink pen. It seems obvious, right? But sometimes I use a non-waterproof ink pen to draw in the outlines, and then I think about, ooh, I wish I would have used something waterproof because I want to go back in and add some more shadows, for example. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna dry this layer. I'll see you in a minute. Dry so fast. Oh, this is wonderful. Okay. I mentioned in the beginning, please feel free to use any other ink tool that you have. You can use a fine liner, or you can even just use a dark colored pencil, a dip pen, or just a brush pen like I'm doing today. The brush pen can create a lot of different weights in the line, so you have to be a bit don't be too timid with the brush pen, because if you only use the very tip of the brush pen, then you pretty much have the same effect as you'd have with a fine liner that has a bullet pen tip, I mean. So make use of the fact that your brush pen can create different lines. You can really play with the thickness and thin variation with those options of your brush pen. And the nice part about the brush pen is also that you can create some additional shadow just by using the broad side of the brush pen and adding some ink like this. And of course you can do this with a fine liner too, but then you have to go and do something like cross hatching, for example. So I love the versatility of the brush pen. I also love to use it in a somewhat unusual angle, I think, for a lot of us who learn to hold a pen like this, like in a writing position. But for drawing, I really recommend that you try and hold it almost as if you were going to lose it. And really try to add the lines in an almost as if you were neglecting the line. You're not even really thinking about it. It just adding a few wisps of a stroke. Now I know that it's very easy for somebody to say that, but it's very hard to put into practice because it looks easy, but it's not. It's years of practice. So if this is impossible for you, don't beat yourself up. This is totally normal, especially if you've never used a brush pen. I'm only giving you these tips so that if you either have used brush pens before or you want to use them more and get better and have more fun, then I'm just giving you these tips. But I'd say in general, for drawing and painting, try to never have a death grip on your tool. I think this is true for all the materials, isn't it? I'm trying to think of something where you're supposed to hold your drawing tool like this and hold on to it. I don't really think I can find an example where that would work. For other crafts, oh yeah, I mean, if you do carving and you have a sharp knife, then by all means, hold on to that tool. But for drawing and painting, maybe if you do miniature painting with a number 0 brush that has 2 hairs, and you go and you paint something that's like this size, then you probably have to have a very firm grip on your brush too. So over in the chat, Alina says that was really hard for her to get used to not gripping the brush too hard. Yeah, and that's why I say it comes naturally to us, because I think a lot of us in school are taught a certain way to hold our fountain pen or pencil or pen, and we get used to it, and then we write. And this is how we hold any tool that's this shape. Art and being free it's hard, because a lot of us for years or maybe decades have used pens in a different way. So we have to kind of retrain our brain. Ooh, that rhymes. Oh, I like it. Retrain your brain. I'm always loving having some silly rhymes going on. So I'm continuing my very loose, flowy lines. Make sure you don't outline everything. So with the fruits, you can see that I mostly added the lines on the left hand side, just like the shadows. So I left this one here totally open. I actually forgot the pineapple. I'll do that later. But yeah, just add the lines mostly on the left hand side. Same is true for the basket, because this way you also emphasize that the shadow is on the left side, while also not weighing down the basket too much. If you outlined every little stroke you made, it's just gonna look too heavy. And try to be fairly quick with this part. I know that this is hard to keep up with a certain pace. I mean, I don't want you to hurry through that line drawing, but don't be too slow. If you go in and you're very slow and deliberate and careful, you won't have this flowy result. Now, if you want to be slow and careful and you want to do fine outlines with a fine liner, then of course, you know, all power to you. I'm just saying, if you want to achieve a look like this, then you have to be a bit faster than you might normally want to be. You gotta hold your brush pen very gently and kind of just go in and dab and dot a little bit. Okay, I got all my lines done for everything but the pineapple. So let's tackle the pineapple. So again, I'm starting with my first line on the left. It's a jagged line because the pineapple has a jagged outline, not smooth. Next, I'm gonna go and add a quick line on the underside of my leaves, both left and right. Alina is asking if a Tombow brush pen would work for this step. That's a good question. They're water-based, aren't they? They should work. They should work, but you just have to make sure your watercolor layer is so dry, super dry. I have to admit, I only own one Tombow brush pen, and that is magenta. Oh wait, you mean these guys, right? Do you mean these guys? The Fudenosuke? These are the ones with the small hard tip. In case you're talking about the large brush pens, the duo tip, then I'd say yes, but I'd also say that you will probably have a larger line automatically because those are really big brush pens. Let me see if I can find a brush pen that is similar. Okay, so I found this is a German brand, Lyra or Lyra. It's very similar to Tombow. I don't really own Tombows, so let's see how that would look. Yeah, I kind of like it. You see that? Definitely you could work with that. I even like the brown, the fact that it's not black. So yeah, I mean, I know that Alina does not like to repeat things that she's already painted, but this would be an interesting thing, you guys. Imagine you have a page like this and you make 4 baskets. You know, you paint them simultaneously. You do 1, 2, 3, 4 baskets, and then you use 4 different pens for the outlines. And this way you can also maybe see what you personally like best for an outline. Do you like a monoline that has the same weight all over? Do you like a brush pen that is, you know, looking a bit more wild, thick and thin? Or maybe you don't like black and you use maybe indigo. So I think this would be interesting to test out. So, oh, back to the pineapple. The poor pineapple. I'm adding a second line here on the left-hand side. And then some little hooks here to indicate the pattern of the pineapple. And you can go ahead and add some more funky lines like this. Again, of course, you can look at a pineapple and really add that pattern that a pineapple has if you like. I'm just gonna, you know, leave it like this. And then for the leaves, you can add some leaves that are bent over like this. So in order to draw a bent over leaf, just do a line like this. And then you add something like a, I don't know, I don't even know what that shape would be called like, but you basically start at this point and take it to the tip, and then you add your line here. So curved line, start somewhere around here, take it to the tip, bring it together, and then add your line like this. It's usually easier to do it on in one direction than in the other direction. So you can practice it, but basically I personally always do it with starting with the upper line, bringing that down, and then connecting. So this looks way worse than the other side, and it's really very, I don't know, it's very normal that one side turns out better than the other. I'm not sure why. And if these bent or folded leaves don't work for you, don't worry about it. You can do the whole pineapple just with, you know, regular triangles like this. And then towards the center of the leaves, you can add a few more strokes with your brush pen to indicate that they go in deeper here. There's some depth. You can add a few more dots on all your left sides of your fruits, but that's optional. Again, this is to make the shadows a bit stronger. But I know it's easy to go a bit overboard with this. So just be careful, and if you're not sure, then just leave it for a minute and, you know, walk away, have a cup of tea, come back, and then maybe you're already done when you look at it again. So I think I am actually done. Yeah, this is okay. I have to say I really like this paper for this type of illustration because I have no bleeds with the ink, but I do have a few nice bleeds with the watercolor or within the watercolor. So as I said in the beginning, if you don't have a lot of layers of watercolor you have to work with, and you don't want to use tons of water. I think this paper is really handy. For those of you who might have missed the beginning, this is the Canson XL watercolor paper, not cotton. Probably I'd say in this price category, I personally, for me, the best paper you can buy that is not cotton and has, you know, tons of pages. You can even use this as a sketchbook. Comes with a spiral. Okay, so tell me, you guys, have you painted along today? Or are you watching soccer? Okay, I'm gonna turn the camera around one more time. To say goodbye for now. Hello. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the session today. For the live streams, there won't be another live stream this month, I believe, but the next one will be for the next round of the challenge in July. So right now I'm planning July 3rd. I think it's a Tuesday, I believe. But please just stay tuned. You know, look at my Instagram and my newsletter to stay updated. And as always, I would very much appreciate if you left a comment here if you enjoyed the stream today. And until next time, aloha and happy painting!